Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. We're back for UFC Vegas 32 for one of the most anticipated main events of the year. It's a big fight in the bantamweight division where we see Cory Sandhagen take on TJ Dillashaw. Having to do things a little bit different. Ty's on vacation. We will be back together breaking down fights together for you guys next week. Last week was much needed and a big night for us. We finished up 6.24 units with a clean sweep of the card. First bet of the night there that you can see was the 4-unit on Mateus Gamrot. We sniped a minus 200 line there, and it hit with absolute ease. We saw the discrepancy in grappling there, but did not expect for it to hit in under a minute. And Gamrot's going to be a big issue going forward. We took a shot on Billy Q as the dog at plus 172, which beat the closing line by a minute. And round 3 finish there for Billy Q did not look like an underdog a single minute in that fight. Down on the prop bets, we took the fight doesn't go the distance at even money and Montserrat Ruiz versus Amanda Lemos, and went exactly how we thought it would and exactly how we needed it to, man. Amanda Lemos' first round KO. Again, think she's going to be a problem for her division going forward and cashed the first leg of a parlay for us. And Daniel Rodriguez finished that parlay off with a first round KO over Preston Parsons himself. Again, man, at plus 250, beat the line. We really were confident on D-Rod there. Usually we always release the plays via Twitter when we place them, but Tyler's in Montana with no service, not able to do that for us. But we do have a 4-unit bet on Kyler Phillips, which we beat the line again. We got a 0.5-unit stab on Belbita, plus 160, which she might not even be the underdog come much longer. And then a unit on Punahele Soriano at Pick'em, man, and really, really good fight. Before we get started, do us a favor, hit that like button, sub to the channel, and hop in those comments and let us know who you guys have in the main event. First fight of the night is where we have our first bet of the night, where we see Diana, the Warrior Princess Belbita, who's 13-6, taking on Hannah, 24K Goldy. Diana Belbita trains up at the House of Champions in Canada. She's 0-2 in the UFC so far, but hoping a drop here to strawweight will actually get her first UFC win. When you look through her regional competition, it is pretty bad, to be honest with you. The 4-fight win streak that got her into the UFC, the opponent's combined record there is 1-2, many of them not experienced at all. And then in her 6 losses, man, she's been submitted in 4 of those. She played right into Jojua's armbar, which is about the only way Jojua wins a fight. She got submitted in round 1 by Ariana Lipski, and then to be taken down 5 times by Meatball Molly McCann, it really shows that there are some big holes that desperately need patching up on the side of Diana Belbita. But she's got really good forward pressure. She puts you on your back foot with combination. She'll look to lock up the body lock up against the cage and drag you down. And, I thought she actually showed a decent account of herself in that Molly McCann fight, minus the point deduction and, her gas tank kind of giving out on her. But she's coming into this fight with a 3-inch height advantage, 3-inch height advantage and 7-inch reach advantage. It's the exact same advantage we just saw Hannah Goldy struggle with against Miranda Granger. And Goldy's got one amateur submission on her record, nothing on her pro record. And she's not really the type to wrestle that makes me worried against Belbita. But for Goldy, training out of Fusion Excel down in Florida with a few injuries and COVID stuff, it actually been about 2 years since we've seen Hannah Goldy step into the octagon. Her first pro win actually does come over fellow UFC flyweight Jillian Robertson. And in her Contender Series performance, man, she put up like 150 significant strikes against Callie Robbins. She looked really, really good. And the Contender Series fight happens to be her only fight at strawweight as well in the past. So it's pretty, new territory for her. She's got a nice little side kick and really good power for her size. You really see it take effect on girls when she lands. But with all that muscle, man, she's real rigid, real stiff in all her movements. She has trouble getting her head off the center line. And in the Miranda Granger fight, she was the one doing all the backing up. She was having trouble closing distance. And I think that's just a bad combination to fight Diana Belbita in a small cage. And I always do my tape study analysis and stuff before looking over at the odds. And it actually quite shocked me to see Hannah Goldy as the minus 195 favorite. Real quick to take a shot on Belbita, who I actually think is the rightful favorite in this one, at least to pick 'em fight. Was able to convince Ty to let us drop half a unit on there before this line adjusts to what I think is more appropriate. So going to go with Diana Belbita to take this one in the first fight, probably by decision, but the layoff of Hannah and stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if there actually was a finish in this fight. Moving on to the next fight of the night. We're in the women's flyweight division where we see Sijara Eubanks, who's 6-6, taking on Elise Reed, who's 4-0. Sijara Eubanks looking to do a lot of work at Nick Katone MMA. with Caitlin Chukagian as a main sparring partner of hers, someone she actually has a loss to earlier in her pro career. With Sijara Eubanks, the record at 6-6, it's not pretty by no means. But Sarge, man, she's really been fighting the best of the best that her division's had to offer, and all 6 of her losses do come to some pretty legit competition. I mentioned Chukagian, Aspen Ladd there twice, Ketlin Vieira, Paney Kyanzad. I think the worst one's probably to Betch Correa, who's a former title challenger in herself. She is dropping back down to flyweight for this one after going 2-4 up at bantamweight, not having a lot of success. I know she ruined a bunch of, a bunch of parlays and a bunch of people's nights, upsetting Julia Avila. But man, it's without a doubt a majority of Sarge's success has come at 125, where she has 2 wins over Roxanne Modafferi, a win over, the number 1 contender getting her shot now, and Lauren Murphy. The grappling of Sarge, it really is an ultimate equalizer with a lot of these girls. She's extremely talented on the mat, and she's landed a takedown in every single one of her UFC fights except for the loss to Ketlin Vieira. She's extremely, extremely strong and heavy on top at flyweight. And I really do think there is a clear path for her to beat Elise Reed here on Saturday. But I really like to see Sarge on the scales here on Friday, before I even, look at playing her. But as the big favorite she is, probably won't see anything playing on Sarge on Saturday. She's not really, one that's worth risking your money over, especially at that price tag. But on the side of Elise Reed, pretty promising prospect. She's 4-0, but she's got an 8-fight amateur record as well. She comes from the CFFC organization, where she's the current strawweight champion. And she just was actually victorious back in May over Hillary Rose, which we've seen on the Contender Series, where she fought was Cheyenne Baez. With Elise Reed, man, at 28 years old, she's really kind of hitting the stride, hitting the prime of her career. She's got a nice counter right hand, and she's willing to trade into the pocket. And if it does go to the mat, she has nasty ground and pound. The big thing worth mentioning here is she's the strawweight champion over there at CFFC, and even debuted in Bellator up at atomweight there. So on relatively short notice, she is coming up a weight class to flyweight, taking on a woman who just fought her last 6 at bantamweight. I do think Sarge is going to be ultimately way too big here on Saturday, especially in the clinch and the grappling situations. It is a dog or pass situation altogether here. Probably won't see any kind of action from us on this fight, but I do expect Sarge to have a lot of success if she goes to those grappling roots of hers. Next up in the men's bantamweight division, we see Julio Arce, who's 16-4, taking on Andre Ewell, who's 17-7. Julio Arce comes off Dana White's Contender Series Season 1, actually debuted with a win over Dane Ige, who's gone on to do great things in the featherweight division. Arce trains at a Tiger Schulman's with great guys like Shane Burgos, Lyman Good, Mike Trezano, a lot of high-level guys that can prepare you for that length of Andre Ewell. He had a great fight with Julian Erosa, who's also a 6'1" featherweight. The boxing looked sharp. He was able to kind of close some distance, land that nice counter left hook, slip in, and use that head movement to not take a lot of damage. He slipped that nice head kick in quite a few times, with it finally landing flush in round 3 with one of the cleanest knockouts that you're going to see to date. We haven't seen Arce since his split decision loss all the way back in 2019 to Hakeem Dawodu. He's actually dropping the bantamweight here. Looking on his social media, he does look in excellent shape physically, though. And he does have an underrated ground game with 5 submissions. We've seen Andre Ewell submitted a few times, so I won't be too shocked if we see Arce come out here like, Mike Trezano in the Klein fight and mix in a couple of these takedowns here. But if you're going to be back in Arce on Saturday, I do feel like it's best that you see this guy on the scale before you make any decisions here. Not oftentimes do you drop a weight class and still come in as a smaller guy. On the side of Andre Ewell, training at a Bomber Squad Boxing Academy, does some work with the famous Mitt Queen, which you see all over the videos. He does rely on his boxing there a lot to win fights. He does work the body good. He's got a really long reach for the bantamweight division that he uses very well. Activity's pretty much been on the side of Andre Ewell, as he fought 3 times since we've seen Arce last step into the cage. A lot of Andre Ewell fights, man, he leaves them really, really close. He's actually been on the winning side of 3 split decisions. I do think, the right guy probably won in all those fights, but that 3rd round, really seems to give Andre Ewell a lot of issues. He's dropped it in his decision wins against Anderson Dos Santos, Erwin Rivera. You just look down through the record, and I think 3 of the 7 pro losses, they come in the 3rd round. And he doesn't have a lot of power on his shots at bantamweight. So a lot of these guys, they're still there the third round to be able to take advantage of that cardio gap, cardio, laps that Andre Ewell has. But first couple rounds, man, he's extremely active on the feet. He'll pepper you with shots to keep that range, fire kicks at the lead leg, and that straight left, like I said, covers a lot of distance with that long reach that he has. And, Tiger Schulman's fighters, they're there to be hit. They're heavy in their boxing stance. Their lead leg's there to be queued up. They're willing to stand in striking range to try to use some head movement or even take one, to land a few of their own. I just really do feel like, off this layoff with the activity of Ewell, I think this fight should be much closer aligned. I think he's going to find the home for some of those kicks and the straight left and frustrate Julio Arce as he's trying to close the distance. So I'm going to go with another underdog here in Andre Ewell. Staying in the men's bantamweight division, we see Adrian Yanez, who's 13-3, taking on Randy the Zohan Costa, who's 6-1. One of the public's favorite fights of the night here, and I couldn't agree more, man. These guys basically did the UFC's matchmaking all for them with their little Dr. Pepper versus Reese's feud on Twitter. It is one of the best fights in the entire card, and I couldn't agree more, like I said, with the public begging to bump this one up to the main card. With Yanez, he trains out of Houston, Texas, and he spent a lot of time in LFA, which is one of my favorite lower organizations to build these prospects up. And Yanez actually even captured the belt there at one point. And man, in his last three performances, he's absolutely, taken the UFC by storm and gained a lot of attention with the last couple. He starts off on the Contender Series just dusting Brady Wong in under a minute with, basically the first little counter combination he threw, earning himself that contract. Gets a UFC debut. Opponent falls out, and Victor Rodriguez, Alaskan FC flyweight, steps up on short notice. Doesn't last very long. Adrian Yanez gets that highlight reel KO with the kick that he's looking for in his debut. He follows that up, getting Gustavo Lopez, a pride brand boxer himself. He couldn't get the wrestling going versus Adrian at all. And anytime he stepped in the range, Adrian really, really made him pay. And he just, like I said, controlled boxing range, and anytime he stepped forward, he made him pay. He had a hard time closing distance, and come round three, Adrian hit that step back combo, beautiful, earning himself his second $50K performance of the night bonus. He almost looked for that step back counter the way Amanda Lemos Figueiredo looks for. His boxing's fantastic though, no wind up, no telegraph, excellent left hook. And he's the way more experienced of the two. I know everybody knows Kelton on MMA Twitter. He put out a big, important stat about this that I think needs to be looked at. And the fact that Adrian Yanez has 2 hours and 45 minutes of cage time versus the 11 minutes and 58 seconds out of Randy Costa. And it's something that if the fight goes deep, it really could make a huge difference. For Randy Costa, come from the Joe Lozon gym up in the New England area, but realize if he wants to be good, man, you do got to go to one of these bigger gyms where you're getting the rounds in every day. And he spent a lot of time at American Top Team for a little bit, but has really seemed to find his home at Sanford MMA. He's been training daily there in South Florida since December, and looking at his social media, man, trains with some of the best in the world. I really do think that he is improving every single time he steps in that gym at the age of he is. He got his call into the UFC relatively inexperienced at only 4-0, and took on 15-fight veteran and Brandon Davis. The round one, extremely crazy. Randy Costa pretty much getting the better of every exchange and really hurting Brandon Davis. But come that second round, man, you combine the octagon jitters of that debut, a couple knees, that Brandon Davis was able to land up the middle. And Zohan had never even seen the second round at that point. And, you combine all that together, and it ultimately led to Brandon Davis getting the finish there in that second round when Randy Costa didn't have much left in the gas tank. But he has bounced back with first-round KOs of Boston Salmon and Journey Newsom, who I do think are better fighters than the ones of Victor Rodriguez, of Gustavo Lopez. He comes out there, Costa doesn't get in your face early in round one, man. He sticks that long jab in your face with a 73-inch reach. After he gets you worrying about the jab, he'll throw the straight right in there first. And he hides all his kicks really, really well behind the punches. This is such a fun fight, man. And I really do think it could go either way. We're going to put the casual cap on the line for this one here, and I'm going to take the dog and Randy Costa. Let Ty have Adrian Yanez there. But this is going to be a fun one here. And ultimately, even though we're not together, we wanted someone wearing the hat next week. Now, next up in the middleweight division, we see Ian the Hurricane Heinisch, who's 13-4, taking on Nassourdine, the Russian sniper Imavov, who's 9-3. Ian Heinisch was part of the Denver, Colorado squad out there, I believe, at Genesis Training Center. But since made the move to Sanford MMA, like a lot of these guys, been training there full time since March. He's a former two-time LFA middleweight champion there, and when he came into the UFC, they tried to push him just a little too quickly, in my opinion. Here, try to push him into the top 15. He lost all those opportunities, making the guy 1-3 in his last 4 fights. The big issue he's ran into is, obviously been the takedown defense. We've seen Brunson, Omari, and Kelvin Gastelum, all, smaller middleweights than him, two welterweights there actually, being able to wrestle him to a decision. On the mat, though, he's only been submitted once in his life. He's a very physically strong individual, hard to keep down, but when you take him down multiple times and make him work, it does take some of that steam away from him. But on the feet, he's extremely durable, never been TKO'd. And Ian's just a grinder, man. His pace, his cardio, and his pressure really starts to take a toll on these guys come round 2 and 3. And, it's not really surprising to see him drop around and then come back to win those. I just imagine he's probably going to try to take a play out of Hall's book here, chop at the leg to limit the movement of Imavov and look to put him up against the cage because I don't really see him wanting to strike with Nassourdine. On the side of Nassourdine Imavov, born in Dagestan, Russia, but like some of the other ones, he's made a move over to France where he's training at an MMA factory coached by Fernand Lopez, which is the guy who's doing, big things with Cyril Gahn right now. We actually did take our chance to try to fade Phil Halls in that last fight and back Imavov and thought he would put up a much better fight than he did. He had a few moments there where we thought he rocked him, but ultimately, the strength, the size, the wrestling, it was all too much for Imavov. When it's at distance, though, the guy's a real dangerous striker, and he does have the wrestling in the back pocket, even though it's not really up to par with a lot of guys from his region. But in terms of the striking, real nice kicks, knees in his arsenal, great footwork. He really resembles the footwork and movement of Gahn. He likes that counter right hand very well, does very well at fighting backwards, in my opinion. And I think he's got to keep this fight at range is kind of what I'm getting at if he's going to beat Ian. He's got a reach advantage. He's got a little size advantage. But Ian just likes to make fights dirty, make them close, and put you on the cage. And I kind of think that's what Ian's going to do here. I've seen some money start kind of coming in on Ian lately, and I do agree with it. I have made a play on it myself. I think he's just – spent that time in LFA, grinded, fought some good competition regardless of losing these fights. And, I think the playbook's there to put him all up on the fence and kind of be more physical than him to be able to get that win on Saturday. And Ty's also going to go with Ian Heinisch as well. In the main event, we see Punahele Soriano, who's 8-0, taking on Brendan All-In Allen, who's 16-4. It's a battle of very, very good prospects out of two of the best gyms in the world. We see Punahele training out of Extreme Couture and Allen out of Sanford MMA now. And between those two gyms, man, are some of the best middleweights in the world for these guys to train with. Particular Soriano, good friend, training partner of Brad Tavares, come to us off the Contender Series, where he got a contract, without looking the best and without getting a finish. He took on Jamie Pickett and put everything into his shots early, a couple grappling exchanges, and the cardio for Punahele, didn't have much left to him, and he kind of had to resort to just wrestling and putting Jamie Pickett on his back in order to get that win. But Dana saw the potential and went ahead and signed him. And in the next two fights, he gets that result that he wanted and looked much better. He got the finish over Oscar Pejoda in his debut, and then as well as Dusko Todorovic, another undefeated prospect in the last one. Nasty strikes, man. He's grinded in the gym every day. At such a young age, he is growing. He's got raw power. And in the southpaw, man, he's got a nasty, nasty left hand. And versus a conventional fighter, man, you always know that the southpaw, the straight left, is always going to have an advantage there. It's the same punch we've seen Brendan Allen struggle with in the past. I really do hate to have to see, two of my favorite prospects have to fight each other, but the potential top 15 spot on the line for the winner here, and you've got to make matchups like this going forward. For Brendan Allen to move from Roufusport over to Sanford MMA, absolute one of the best moves this guy could have made for his career. You had Gerald Mearshart at Roufusport, about the only middleweight for him to train with, and I could go, list tons of middleweights over there at Sanford MMA. For Brendan to get to work with on a daily basis, not only that, but the striking under Henry Hooft, I think we're already seeing it improve for Allen. He's added a lot of kicks to his game that we saw in the Roberson fight, and he's still only 25 years old. he was losing to guys at 20 and 21 years old in LFA who have all made it to the UFC at this point. So looking at the records and looking at who these guys have fought, the experience factor is on the side of Brendan Allen all day. And he's also got in real ground game. This guy's a legit black belt on the mat. And he comes out round one trying to implement that grappling heavy approach every single time. What I don't really like about it though is he puts himself in bad spots sometimes. Eager for that submission, he loses position, and like I said, ends up in bad spots, taking some ground and pound that he shouldn't be taking. And when I look down through the lineup of who he's gotten in the UFC so far, it's kind of been some favorable matchups. When you look at Kevin Holland, Tom Breeze, Carl Roberson, and even Ian Heinisch before Kyle Dawkins steps in on short notice, all of those guys struggle with the wrestling and the takedown defense. And if Brendan Allen got it to the mat, we knew he was ultimately going to get a finish there. Punahele really hasn't shown us too much of his ground game, but I do expect him to be able to put up a better fight than a lot of these guys there. Another big point I want to make with Brendan Allen is the guy's striking defense. He absorbs over 4 strikes a minute, and in all of these fights, you see him take some damage before getting even some of his finishes. His striking defense really isn't up to par. And it's not something that you like to see going into a fight with someone like the power of Punahele Soriano. So yeah, man, I just think Allen. I think he gets hit too much, and if Punahele can stop these takedowns, I think he's going to put Brendan Allen out inside the distance. But sitting at a pick'em, we went ahead and released a 1-unit bet on Punahele Soriano on Saturday night. On the main card in our welterweight division, we see Mickey Gall, who's 6-3, taking on Jordan Williams, who's 9-4. Mickey Gall entered the UFC with a ton of hype behind him. I think it was on Dana White's looking for a fight, where calls out CM Punk after getting his first win there, and ultimately leads with him getting a shot in the UFC. And I think he got Mike Jackson there before CM Punk. But I mean, man, we all knew exactly what was going to happen there with Mickey Gall. Took him straight to the mat, submitted both of them. He then gets big time prospect and Sage Northcutt, ends up submitting him as well. Sage really hasn't panned out to be that much. And then you add George Sullivan and, Celine to the list of who Mickey Gall's got his 6 wins over. And it's not really anybody worth writing home about, man. Nobody really do too good. He's been training out of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in North Jersey, but you look on his Instagram, it seems like Matt Brown's kind of taking him under his wing a whole lot, doing a whole bunch of training with him over at his own gym. It's been over a year since we've seen this guy, Mickey Gall, in the octagon. He lost to Mike Perry his last time out. But at 29 years old, with such a good jiu-jitsu game, any time out for Mickey Gall to round up that striking, there's potential for him to be, a really good fighter. But being such a big welterweight, man, he does like a lot of the strength and a lot of the wrestling chops, I think, to be a real good fighter. Another thing Mickey Gall struggled with at being a big welterweight is the weight cut. We've seen it be really rough on Mickey Gall in the past, as well as, when he's got fight coming back toward him, he doesn't like to get hit. He shells up a little bit, and maybe it's due to the weight cut, but the gas tank of Mickey Gall is nothing to write home about either. On the side of Jordan Williams, a Factory X Muay Thai guy, we see him drop into 170 for this one. It's not really uncharted territory for him, former welterweight. It just hasn't made the weight since about 2016. We see him fought 3 times on the Contender Series to earn his way to the UFC. In my opinion, he kind of got robbed of one on the first time around. Got to the nice 3rd-round finish on a 5-day notice, and ultimately should have taken the contract that night, but didn't. And ultimately, he fails for marijuana, which is why you see it being a no contest on his record. The second time around, he's the plus 300 underdog when he takes on Ramazan Kuragomedov, which in my opinion, I think Kuragomedov has a long future ahead of him in the UFC. I think he's going to be a legit welterweight and should have a debut coming up here soon. But him and Williams went at it, and I wouldn't have been upset with either one of them guys, maybe even both of them taking a contract home that night. They didn't, and we see Jordan Williams have to rep off a couple more wins there before he takes another shot on the Contender Series. Maybe his best win to date, where he takes on Gregory Rodriguez and finishes him with the flurry of punches against the cage and puts him away. And Gregory Rodriguez, he looked good against his debut last time against Dusko, and it's just adding to their level of competition that Jordan's fought throughout his career. He's a smaller middleweight, so I do think welterweight is much suited for him if he can make that weight healthy. I really do favor him in the striking. He's got a fantastic, hell of a chin. I don't think he's going to be scared of what Mickey Gall's throwing at him. My only real concern is the way that he was leaving his neck out on some of those takedown attempts against Imavov. Mickey Gall is very good on the mat, and I think Jordan is going to be able to outpower him in all these wrestling, opportunities. But you really can't make mistakes against someone on the caliber of Mickey Gall. And if he does leave his neck out like that, Mickey Gall is primed to wrap something up. Gall just doesn't really entice me as a dog right now. Like I said, the scale has always been a big battle for him. So maybe you'd like to see him make weight before if you want to back him, or maybe even if Jordan being the one that's actually dropping a weight class, if he's got a bad weight cut, maybe look to potentially live bet Mickey Gall. Ultimately, going to be a pass for me altogether now on this fight, but I do expect a good one to kick off the main card. Next up in the flyweight division, we see Macy, the future Barber, who's 8-2, taking on Miranda, Fear the Maverick, who's 9-2. Macy Barber has switched up her camps and made the move over to Team Alpha Male, which I think could potentially be a really good move for this girl's career. She came into the UFC with so much hype, big talker, not just walking the walk, man, talking the talk. She's finishing girls left and right. Easy win on the Contender Series, and I mean, boy, did she live up to the hype in her debut against Hannah Cyphers. I mean, she left her in a bloody mess there. But ultimately, the weight cut a little rough for Macy there at straw weight. She's made the move up to flyweight, and the finishes, they kept coming. You could see when she was fighting J.J. Aldrich, when she landed, I mean, you could see it on J.J.'s face, and she was the first one to get J.J. out of there with strikes. She comes out conventional against Jillian Robertson, which I think threw her off a whole bunch, and she looked just as dangerous. And again, you could see another flyweight that just couldn't take Macy's power and gelled up on the fence with another TKO victory. Macy's just downright mean, man. She comes at you, she gets in her face, she really tries to impose that athleticism, that strength advantage on girls. But I do question as she goes up in the weight class, to the higher level of fighters in the flyweight division, just how well that's going to work. There's some big girls there. She's got a nice jab, good knees on the clinch, but at this point, she found herself on a two-fight win or a two-fight losing streak. I do give her a pass in the one where she tears her ACL, and you probably even give her a pass on the fight back after that. But no one can deny that she didn't look the best in that fight with Alexa Grasso. On the side of Miranda Maverick, trains out of the House of Muay Thai, but here recently has been in Vegas at the PI, doing a lot of work with the girl in our co-main event, Aspen Ladd. Spent a lot of time in Invicta as well before coming up into the UFC, fighting good regional level competition girls, won a same night tournament, which doesn't reflect on her record. And in the debut, a little bit of octagon jitters maybe, but once she got going, she really started flowing with that striking in the Jojua fight. She was sitting down on her punches, always throwing in combination, into them with switching levels with the kicks. And once she found the home for that lead elbow, she landed it a couple times, which led to that doctor stoppage of the nasty cut. I kind of agree. Just real bad cut, not a bad spot. Maybe could have kept going, but man, I do think Maverick would have ultimately got the finish there as well. Follows it up with a win over Gillian Robertson of her own. We got to see her grapple. We got to see her go 15 minutes, and I thought she looked good, man. She's a natural flyweight, so when they do lock up in these clinch and wrestling exchanges, I'm curious to see who the stronger of the girls is going to be. I know all the talk of Miranda. She doesn't have good head movement. I see it as well. Jojua landed a couple right hands of her own, but we can't act like Macy Barber has, the best head movement of her own. Even prior to her hurting her ACL, Roxy touched her up a little bit, We saw J.J. Aldrich set her down with the straight left hand when she threw a naked kick, and I think Miranda's way more technical of the two. I think this is a really, really fun fight, man. I think it's a really close fight. I'm going to go with Miranda Maverick. I think she's more technical of the two, and I think Macy Barber's probably going to run into a lot of her punches on Saturday. I think both of these girls, man, going forward, they're primed for a bunch of finishes, but I do think this one probably hits the scorecards. Going to go with Miranda Maverick on Saturday. Next up in the featherweight division, we have Darren the Damage Elkins, who's 25-9, taking on Darrick Minner, who's 26-11. Darren Elkins always doing his camp with Uriah Faber and the guys over at Team Alpha Male. He's been a staple in the UFC for well over about a decade now. One time we see him go on a 5-fight win streak before running into prime Chad Mendez and getting finished in round one. And And even a couple years ago, we see him put together 6 wins in a row before running into the current champ in Volkanovski, who pretty much beat him from pillar to post. On those win streaks, particularly the last 6-fight win streak, really when Darren Elkins started living up to the tattoo on his chest, man. The comeback wins over Mirsad Bektic, the one over Michael Johnson, it's vintage Darren Elkins and fights that love to watch over and over again. In those win streaks, though, you also see Darren Elkins use the wrestling a whole lot more, and particularly you don't on his 4-fight win streak. He's more interested in going in there and making it a stand-up war, trying to collect that $50K bonus, and it took him being on a 4-fight losing streak and the brink of getting released in order for him to go back to the wrestling against someone like Eduardo Garagori. I just ultimately think that he's slowing down big time. It's hard for me to favor someone who's getting dropped on the feet twice by Ryan Hall. He doesn't move his head so much, man. The striking is just really not there for Darren Elkins. But the dude has an unreal gas tank. And if your cardio is not up to snuff, man, Darren Elkins is not going anywhere. He's a hard man to finish. And if you don't put him away, he's going to be there for all 15 minutes. With Darrick Minner, probably the most experienced 31-year-old I've ever seen. I think he's going on being a pro for a decade himself, taking the toughest regional matchups that he could find, fighting in plenty of different organizations. This is going to be the 38th fight for him in 10 years. I mean, the guy's averaging almost 4 fights a year, being extremely active, but I think he's probably really started to hit his strides with the guys over at Glory MMA, being coached by James Krause. He got his contender series opportunity when he took on Herbert Burns. And, man, Minner looked great. He was dominating that fight. Even in all the grappling exchanges, he was hurting Herbert Burns on the feet. And, ultimately got subbed by a very dangerous black belt. 2 months later, he's back in the cage beating Terrence McKinney inside one, gets another round 1 finish before taking that late notice opportunity to fight Grant Dawson. Threatened Grant Dawson quite a few times with that patented guillotine of his. But Grant really just went on to wear on the man with that wrestling and found the sub in round 2. And if you can't beat him, join him, man. That's when you see Darrick Minner make the move over to Glory MMA, training with Grant Dawson, guys like that. And here recently, man, he's really looked good. He's cashed back-to-back underdog tickets for people. A quick guillotine on TJ Laramie as a plus 260 underdog, which looking back is absolutely criminal. I mean, and as a plus 150 underdog, dominates Charles Rosa from start to finish, on the feet, on the mat, looks sensational. Minner is a lightning fast starter. He's got 22 first round finishes, 21 submissions on his record. And at Glory MMA under James Krause, I think you're seeing the striking improve a little bit. He's got a nice counter right hand, adding some kicks to it. And I think he's going to have a massive speed advantage here against Darren Elkins. I'm going to go with Minner to take this one here. I already put a bet on him, beat the line. It's continuing to climb. But, man, like I said, Darren Elkins is not going anywhere. And if Darrick Minner, come round 2 or 3, his gas tank's fading, man, there is potential to cash a big live ticket on Darren Elkins. So he's always live for that 3rd-round finish, man. Real close fight, but I'm going to go with Darrick Minner to get this one done on Saturday. Next up in the men's bantamweight division, we see Kyler the Matrix Phillips, who's 9-1, taking on Raulian Paiva, who's 20-3. Kyler Matrix Phillips is training out of the MMA lab there in Arizona with a couple of really good bantamweights, man, like Casey Kinney and Sean O'Malley trying to crack their way into the top 15. He got a win over the Contender Series in the first round. He was only 4-0. And, at that point, man, I really did agree with Dana. I didn't think he was ready for the UFC. He got put on the Ultimate Fighter up a weight class at featherweight, where he did lose to the eventual winner in Brad Cantona. A couple fights later, we see him back in the octagon for a debut. And the Kyler Phillips that I see in the octagon now, man, is much improved from the Kyler Phillips that I saw in the Contender Series. He has a ton of potential now. And like I said, I didn't used to think so, man, but he is improving at a rapid rate, and I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. Phillips has fantastic footwork, unorthodox movements. He's able to flow from both stances. He throws a bunch of, variety of kicks, beautiful combinations at you. And this guy is a serious black belt. He's been training jiu-jitsu his entire life. And in those clinch and in those wrestling positions, I feel like the natural bantamweight is going to be a whole lot stronger there. Raulian Paiva coming up from 125 pounds to bantamweight here. We haven't seen him in a year since tearing his ACL and having a little bit of trouble on the scale. His last win is over Zhalgas Zhumagulov, which a bit controversial as it is. I think on a lot of other nights, August takes that fight, but Paiva missed weight in that one. And then on his comeback a couple months ago and gets David Dvorak, he's hospitalized due to a botched weight cut just like a month and a half, 2 months ago, man. Not something you really like to see, but I had a lot of hope for Paiva at flyweight. He had a ton of physical advantages there, but that move to bantamweight just seemed inevitable at this point. Before that Dvorak fight, he did move camps to Team Alpha Male, which he's been at for the last couple of months. I think that's going to be huge for the 25-year-old. It's going to pay wonders. There's a lot of high level talent for him to get the work in compared to his old camp. He's got a really nice counter left hook. He keeps you honest, keeps your guard tight with attacking you with a lot of high kicks. His hands are real fast, but he's always been the one, the bigger guy. Everyone's always had to close distance on him. And now it's going to be the exact opposite. I truly have a hard time seeing how Raulian Paiva wins this. I think skill for skill, Phillips, just about bests him everywhere. He is the natural bantamweight. Again, I think he'll be stronger in any kind of grappling situations that are going to occur. I favor him on the feet. We beat the line by quite a bit. We've released a 4-unit play there on Kyler Phillips. Yeah, man, this reminds me of the Gamrot pick last week. One of my most confident picks on the night, and one that we're willing to lay a couple units there to get back. In the co-main event of the evening, we see the number 3 Aspen Ladd, who's 9-1, taking on the number 9 and Macy Chiasson, who's 7-1. Important fight in the bantamweight division here. Aspen Ladd normally doing a lot of her work in California there, her main gym, but this past month been at the PI. I mentioned there with Miranda Maverick, with KGB Lee, and some other girls. She's been out for about a year and a half now, dealing with the ACL, the MCL tear, and in my opinion, that is enough right there alone for me not to really trust her the first fight back at her current price tag. But the girl has a work ethic like no other. If there's a fight that is 1-1 going into the third round, 9 times out of 10, I'm banking on Aspen Ladd to take that fight. She's got a workhorse. She's a workhorse in the octagon, man. And, you look at the level of competition she's fought. She's fought much better competition. She's finished Lena Landsberg, who is, Macy's only professional loss there. I just got to think in this matchup, she's going to look to minimize that distance, put Macy up against the cage, land a few takedowns, try to eat that gas tank of Macy. And if it does get to the striking range, look to land some calf kicks and stuff, chop down Macy. Whenever I do the tape study for Aspen, man, it worries me in this particular fight, though. Not just the layoff, but you watch the GDR fight. She gets hit with a straight shot. That really worries me with Macy having a 6-inch reach advantage. And then with Macy's style of putting girls up on the fence and implementing her will, you can't watch the Yana Kunitskaya fight and not be a little worried if you're back in Aspen Ladd here. With Macy Chiasson, training out of Fortis MMA, coached by Saif Saud, she's a really big girl for this division. She won Ultimate Fighter 145 pounds, but kind of just like, a way into the UFC there for her shot. And she dropped to 35 as soon as it was done. There's a couple fights where her cardio has kind of been bad, but I don't believe she's missed weight once at 35, and I really do feel like nutrition has been a big focus of hers as of late. At the weight class, all the physical advantages you could want. She's 5 inches taller here, a 6-inch reach. She has a great jab when she wants to use it to keep the range. And when she's in southpaw, she's got a nasty straight left hand. And again, I mentioned when she wants to put you up against the cage, she's very big and can impose her will like that. I get she's still very green, man. I could not agree more. And she loves being the hammer, hates being the nail. She hates when the fight's coming back up her way. And I see a lot of flack for, dropping round 1 to Marion Renault. Yeah, and not one that you want to drop around to, I get it. But she'd been out a year, kind of had to shake some octagon rust off. First time in the small octagon, I kind of get it. She's been a massive favorite in every single one of her fights, man, getting up as high as a minus like 850, I think, in some. I think with the size advantage she has here, the layoff of Aspen Ladd, the 2 fights I brought up of Ladd that stylistically I think gives Macy Chiasson a chance. I think all that is warrant of a stab in my book on Macy Chiasson to get the double on Saturday. Not too confident, but I think the line is wide, should be much closer to a pick 'em. So, yeah, I absolutely don't hate a shot if you want to take the dog and Macy Chiasson on Saturday. Our main event of the evening takes place between the number 2 ranked Cory Sandhagen, who's 14-2, taking on the 2-time bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw, who is 16-4. one of the most anticipated main events of the entire year. I've been waiting on this one for so long. We've had to wait a couple weeks longer than anticipated due to a little cut that TJ, suffered during camp there. The first time around, the books opened it as a pick 'em, and we saw Sandhagen steamed. And when the fight got rebooked, Sandhagen opens at minus 155, minus 165. So I truly think the time to bet Cory Sandhagen, it's really long gone, in my opinion. He trains out of Team Elevation. Cardio been a huge, weapon for that gym. He's also got a really good size for this division. He switches stances just as good as TJ. He's got great footwork, great lateral movement. He's got a really nice calf kick to his game, which is, really something that's become a weapon during TJ's absence. Another thing Cory has is unreal volume, man. This guy lands over 7 shots per minute, peppers you with anything to be able to keep his range. In his last two, he's arguably looked his best, been knocking on that title challenger doorstep for some time. The last two, particular against Marlon Moraes, able to keep the range and just beat Marlon up and set up that spinning wheel kick in round 2. And then in Frankie, we never really got to see if Frankie would be able to test his wrestling. He set the trap early round 1, landed the beautiful flying knee, which in my opinion is probably the best knockout of this year so far. And then, even in his loss, I want to reference with the Aljamain fight. TJ's been doing 5 rounds his whole life, man. We've never seen Cory Sandhagen extended, and I know Team Elevation is supposed to have that cardio, but it's just a question mark. It's something we've never seen of Cory. For TJ, man, long-time people of Dwayne Ludwig, main training partners of Cub Swanson, Bellator's Juan Archuleta. First real, person of the training lab there. They always have TJ in just tip-top shape physically. And, he's been extremely open about the EPO. He didn't try to hide it. He was real open, put it behind him, and, said that they went back and tested his other samples. And I don't really know if that was a necessity, including they found out that he popped against Henry. I feel like it would have shown up in his past ones. EPO doesn't seem like something that's too easy to hide. But, he was cleaning all the other ones. It's something that he seemed to take to try to help that weight come off or still have that cardio despite draining all that weight in the Henry fight. He's also had time to let these nagging injuries heal, man. You've seen him get a couple surgeries done, I believe, on his shoulders. And I'm not really buying into all the hype that TJ is going to come out here and look like a shell of himself. He is a former world champion, and I think he still has potential to be that. He needs to pressure Cory, put him on his back foot, not let Cory use all that lateral movement. When you put him on his back foot, he can't fire off all those kicks that he likes to use. By doing that in the small octagon, it's going to help close the distance, help TJ land some of his shots, and even mix in a takedown or two, man, to keep Cory honest. I do agree that TJ's a better wrestler here, but there's really only, one fight in particular that you see TJ come out with a really, really wrestling-heavy game plan, and that's the Lineker fight. Lineker hits like a truck and is really small. TJ knew he had that all day. Curious to see how much he wrestles here, but TJ is about as technical and fun on the feet as it gets. So crisp, no wind-up on any of the hooks, and one of my all-time favorite fighters here. There's so many question marks in this fight with him. He got pushed back a couple of weeks, so I do want to address the cut situation. How much sparring has he got to do the last couple of weeks in the camp? How has that affected, the camp's training schedule about getting weight off of him? The layoff. He's 35 years old. He's not taking a tune-up fight. He's jumping straight back up, into the top of the division. He's not Misha Tating it and taking someone on a 4-fight win streak. And then in media, I see him almost overlooking Cory. He's already talking about the Jan Sterling title situation and see if he can find his way in there. Already talking about if they rematch, he's fine with fighting Ralph Font. And then you combine that with the size disadvantage and stuff that TJ's coming in here with. Again, top 5 all-time favorite fighter of mine. I hope Bruce is in there on Saturday introducing him. My heart wants TJ to win this so bad. I think there's phenomenal matchups in front of TJ sitting there with Peter Yan. Man, my gut just tells me Cory Sandhagen is going to be too much on Saturday for TJ to bite off and, to jump right back into the mix too. I'm going to go with Cory Sandhagen to win the main event on Saturday. That concludes all the breakdowns for the fights on Saturday. The casual cap is going to be on the Adrian Yanez versus Costa fight. That is going to be an excellent fight, probably the public's most anticipated fight there. Can't wait for that one on Saturday. But not to just steal that one, the fight of the night for me, I'm going to have to go with the prelim main event, which Punahele, Soriano, and Brandon Allen. two great prospects looking to jump up in the top 15. I don't see it going the distance, and I think it's an appropriate spot to get a lot of viewers on Saturday. My fighter to watch, I'm going to go with TJ Dillashaw in the main event. Getting disrespected odd-wise, two-time bantamweight champion, coming back. He's got a lot to prove, and he's one of my favorite, man. So I'm going to go with TJ as my fighter. The best underdog pick on Saturday. She might not be an underdog too long, man, but Deanna Belbita is the best underdog so far for me. I think Macy Chiasson as well, particularly, could be one. But yeah, going to go with Deanna Belbita. And then my best bet is going to be Kyler Phillips. Already dropped a 4-unit there. It's hard for me to see ways that Paiva wins this fight. And on Friday, it's going to be extremely interesting. There's 5 fighters in new weight classes, Paiva being the only one that's jumping up. We got 5 fighters going down a weight class. So make sure to pay attention on, to get some good reads on Friday when these guys are weighing in. I think we've hit the spots that we like the best with Punahele, Kyler Phillips, and the Deanna Belbita money line. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and we'll be back together next week to break down some fights for you.